So the Ikessar Falcon is the sequel to K.S. Villoso's The Wolf of Areñaro, and as a sequel, it is one solid book. So as a whole, I don't think you will be able to appreciate much of the second book without reading the first book. It's the kind of series where I believe you really have to read in order. And this second book is clearly a book that is in the middle of a series. And what I mean by this is that it follows events from the first book, it continues from those events from the first book, and a lot of new things happen in the second book that will not be resolved. So it's definitely in the middle of something. Things that will probably and most likely be resolved in the third and final book. So as a whole, this second book takes things from the first book that weren't given much attention or were probably seemed minor in the first book, and that information from the first book is taken into the second book and given more attention. So for those who have read the first book and are in tune to the tiny little details that have happened in the first book, will have a lot of fun thinking back on what has happened in the first book and relating it to the second book. But this doesn't mean that if you aren't that in tune to the tiny details of the first book that you won't be able to enjoy this second book. Because this second book has more of what we loved in the first book. Not only that, we also get a ton of new things. So it's definitely something that those who have loved the first book will enjoy even more. Also because there's a ton of character development and things that when you think this character is done with, but it's actually not. There's still that some of these characters actually still have more to show. When you think you figured them out in the first book, when you read the second book, and then you might start rethinking and who you like and who you don't like from the first book. And maybe even some that you hate even more. Or let's just say that there are characters that you will start having a love-hate relationship. So the first chapter of the Ikessar Falcon gives a really good quick refresher on the events that have happened in the first book. So if it's been a long while since you've read the first book, then you don't really have to reread it to understand on what is happening in the second book. But it's definitely also a good idea if the information from the first book is fresh. What I felt though when I finished the second book was this sudden urge to want to read the first book again because of all those tiny details that I know were mentioned in the first book that were suddenly amplified in the second book, and things that I wish I could have remembered in detail. Things that I wanted to trace back in the first book. That's how much fun I had reading the second book. That after it, when I finished, it took me 10 days straight before I could read anything else. Because I kept thinking, let's just say I saw something in this second book that I related it to the first book that was not resolved, and I really hope the third book will satisfy my curiosity in that one thing. And I can't tell you about it. So back to the first chapter of the Ikessar Falcon, it bridges the first and the second book really well, right from the first chapter, without it sounding too much like a summary. It really just, the flow is really good. I really liked it because it didn't feel like the author just telling me, okay, this is what happened, this is what happened. No, it's just, the flow is just really it just connects really well. So aside from having more of what has happened in the first book and having new information, what is different in this second book is that this story is now divided into 3 different acts. Because Talian is finally going home. Or is she really? Because remember that For Talian, home is Orenyaro, and Jinsayang is one big kingdom. So there's that to think about. So like I said, we're getting more action, but we're also getting more of the mages and dragons. So if you like dragons, you're gonna have fun with this. But that's not all. We're also getting something new. What that something new is, you'll have to read to find out. So this is why I think that the Ikessar Falcon is a solid sequel, even though it's a middle of a series, because you're also getting a lot of new information. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot, because we went from 400 plus pages in the first book to 600 plus pages in the second book. And at the rate it was going, I'm now wondering how is this even going to end on the third book? I mean, is it really ending on the third book? Are we really only getting 3 books out of this? There was just too many things happening in the second book that I really can't wait to see how this is going to wrap up. I'm going to expect the third book to be at least 600 pages, if not more. 700. And I'm really excited. See, I know this second book just released and I'm already excited for the third book. And honestly, I have no idea where it's gonna go after the things that have happened at the end of the second book. So yeah, luckily, based on the timeline of the release of the first and this second book, looks like the third book isn't that too far away from release date. So yeah, with that said, if you've read The Wolf of Orenyaro, you should definitely go and get a copy of this second book. It's out now, and I'll put a link to the blog tour in the description box, so you should check that out, where it will take you to links of all other blogs that you should definitely check out. If you want more discussion about Ikessar Falcon, you can check the hashtag DethroneTheDragonlord over at Twitter and Instagram to find people who has read the book or are planning to read the book. Also, watch out for the TRIHOES live show. They will be discussing the Ikessar Falcon on Gerald the Bookworm's channel tomorrow, September 26 at 7:30 p.m. Philippine time. And their discussions is always a lot of fun to watch. So watch out for that tomorrow. A huge thank you to Caffeine Book Tours and Orbit Books for making this blog tour possible, and they provided all tour participants with advanced reader's copy and also providing ebook copies of the first book. And most especially, a huge thank you to K.S. Villoso for writing this story that is very Filipino. I never thought I would ever come across a book like this, something like this, in my lifetime, and I'm so glad I did. And it's a book I definitely look forward to reading again and again. Definitely going to reread once the third book is out. So go get your copies and see you in the next one.